Greetings, theists and non-theists. I'm the Atheist Paladin. I'm going to jump into melee with Veritas' project with the presumption of atheism. In watching this series of these videos, I have come across several conclusions or several problems that I have with the whole thing. Now, Veritas starts off by saying that the negative atheist position is inconsistent, and that trying to define yourself by what you are not is not a logically valid means of establishing a position. But the problem is that Veritas, when he is defining God, a personal agent that is timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and holds all the classical positions of omnipresence, omniscient, and omnibenevolence, and is self-existent. There are a few problems with that. All those the first three properties that he gives about God are all negative attributes. This is God is not within time. He has no dimensional attributes. In other words, he can't define with space, no length, and he has no mass. He's immaterial. So God's not time. He's not measurable in length, and he has no mass. That doesn't define what God is. And then there's the classical, what I call the omnibus. The omni attributes, and all those have their own issues. So I'm going to start this off with the theological non-cognitism. So the first set of issues is basically the first set of properties gives us nothing of what God is, and then he gives these relational attributes, and these attributes don't make no sense themselves. Because we all know about the problem of being all-powerful. And all-powerful has a certain issue. What is its limit? There is none. But then that leads to actual contradictions of what we all have already heard. Cannot God create a rock so big that he cannot lift it? Or nuke a burrito so hot that he can't eat it? Personally, that's my favorite. So it entails if God can do anything except contradict himself, then, well, he can't really do anything. If he contradicts himself, that only reveals that that the whole definition of being omnipowerful has no logical meaning to it. So either either the definition of omnipowerful or all-powerful is null, basically, due to its own contradictions, or God's just really not all-powerful. He is limited in some sort of way, and we must reduce that definition to something else. And then there's a problem of being all-knowing. It's like, can you really know what it's like to be ignorant, but when knowing everything? That's simply impossible. This is punctuated by Gödel's theorem, incompleteness theorem. It says, given within any system of axioms, there are things that cannot be known or determined. So as a result, that actually places limits on knowledge and what can be known. But God is said to be all-knowing. Well, that's a direct contradiction of Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Is there anything that can be provided that can, in the description of being all-knowing, that can finally provide a way that everyone, that this particular being, God, can be all-knowing? And that certainly proposes certain issues. And then omnipresent, God being everywhere. How is it that which directly conflicts with God being spaceless? Because he has no way of being everywhere, and yet he is everywhere, and that's a blatant contradiction right there. And then the property of self-existent. I think that what he means is God has that there is nothing that he is contingent on, and that's just about the only attribute that I really don't have any problems with. So all we are left with is a being that is not contingent on anything else, but has the contradictory attributes of not being anything at all, not having time, not having mass, not having length, and relational attributes of being all everything. So at the end result of examining Veritas' definition of God, we don't have anything left. We still don't know what God is. So I mean, that's where the fundamental problem lies. And then Veritas complains about that he's being pigeonholed into the deist camp, when he's saying that's not really the case. But what the definition when Veritas gave of God can be used for a deist God. He can still be a personal agent, but that doesn't mean he has a personal interest, and that's different. That's the dividing line between what is a theist God and what is a deist God, and that's God's interest, and namely his interest in the creation of the world, or in the beings of the world. But in order to establish that this God has certain interests, you can't really go you can't not go, well, he's personal, but there's nothing that we say that he's personal about. And that gives us a deep problem, because you cannot say he's personal without actually going into particular doctrines or religious differences that you have. Now, the only advantage that Veritas has is that with Dollar Films, that they can say they're Abrahamic, if they believe in the Abrahamic God, and without conflating their differences by simply agreeing to disagree on things that they have issue with. But that doesn't give anything for us to do, unless we're going to have to talk about the historicity of these religions. And yet Veritas seems kind of not wanting to do that. He wants to keep this discussion purely about if God can exist, and yet the only issue that we can actually have a reasonable debate is the area of God's personality and his interaction of being personal with the world, because that makes all the difference between a deistic God and a theistic God. And without that difference, we have nothing to talk about except maybe what Veritas given was logically coherent, which is not. So that's my video. So I hope you enjoyed, Veritas.